here I am on my third tape so far, and not altogether sure where I even am in this business, but I'll think about the Korea years for a minute, and think about the people I worked with over there, not on my own team, but more the UN people. And these were men and women who kind of followed the trouble spots around the world. I guess I'd think of them now as expatriates, just going from one to the next. And while in some ways their life seemed kind of exciting or glamorous or something, it also seemed kind of sad and empty to me in ways. They seemed to be largely single people or people who had left their families behind and would go join them again from time to time in some more normal spot of the world. Korea was not at that time a place for families. I guess that at some point I must have realized that although I was interested in adventures in life, that there's really only one great adventure was to raise a family, and then you would have this ongoing adventure that would never cease, day to day, from year to year, and got on into eternity, I guess. And I think that was a pretty good realization. I think in reality that turned out to be the most fun and the most lasting. I think it was a correct perception. Then I think back of the end of my stint with my first stint with the radio station, and maybe a whole bunch of things about that. That had come to, I think I had decided to bring that to an end because it was time to move on, and I applied for a job with the Midnight Sun Broadcasting Company in Alaska. Went down and interviewed the guy who would come to Seattle, and got the job. But I had wanted to get what I thought of as a job kind of at some kind of a grassroots level in the world. Really, partly, in fact maybe mainly, as a part of the idea of going on in life and being a newscaster. And I thought I really need to get down and see what's going on here. So that same afternoon I had a chance to get a job that I'd been looking for a long time, which was with a Quaker who was simply going to Korea to build houses where things had been destroyed. And I really wanted to do that for some reason. And I went back and quit the Midnight Sun Broadcasting job, and they were kind of mad. Same day, decided to go with Floyd Schmo, the Quaker, to build houses in Korea. As it turned out, that Floyd had also agreed with the UN to take on another project in which you were trying to help farm communities to rebuild themselves in other ways as well. And spent a year doing that with Floyd, both building houses and the UN thing. But the UN and Floyd had some disagreements about how to do things. And Floyd was not an easy person to disagree with. Jim Sharshman and I also disagreed with how he was using the UN funds to some degree, not too much, but we finished our year with Floyd, and the UN had asked us to come over to the village of Sakyo and start perhaps a more realistic, as they had in mind, pilot project for this community coordinated development effort, kind of a bootstraps operation to help move the farm culture of Korea, which was the most of the culture at that time, ahead a bit. We found this very interesting, and Jim stayed for half the year, and then I took over the project. And it was always very rewarding. In fact, that whole 2 years in Korea was incredibly rewarding. I must say, I enjoyed the heck out of it. Thought it was very, very valuable. Other than the work itself, which was challenging and gave me an opportunity to pretty much make my own plans from day to day and all year long, the Korean situation itself was, in all of its post-war destruction and poverty and everything else, was just a wonderful, warm thing for me. Out in the boonies mostly, but even up in the city and in the black market. It was amazing how much it was that way. You know, people ask about the climate, is it cold or something like that? And sure, you have some snow in the winter, and you get kind of cold. It depends exactly where you are in Korea. But I think the terrible cold that people associated with the Korean War, the American troops and all, had more to do with either being up in the mountains a little farther north, as they were from time to time, or just had to do with the fact that you're out in it all the time and there's no place to come in and get warm. But I guess you could say that it was a kind of a nice dry cold, and didn't last all that long. I mean, the most beautiful season of the year there was the fall. It was wonderful, wonderful, sunny, golden fall days, when you could wander up a path into a village that had nothing more than a path to get to it, and you'd maybe break out on a little ridge of hills and look down upon the top of a thatched roof village, the houses all bunched up against each other on the hillside so as to save the lower flatland for the rice fields. And in the fall, as I guess I've told you, the crop of red-hot peppers drying on every scarlet straw roof in the little villages. So I have to admit to the fact that having jeeps to run about in was always fun. I like that. But there wasn't much else you get around in anyway. And we had definitely places to go and things to do. It wasn't just a joke, which makes it all the better. So we're roaming around this war-destroyed place out in the boonies, and I guess having a good time doing it. Not long after Scharschmidt had left, and I'd had the project pretty much in my own hands, I was required to type up a summary of all the work that myself and my people had been doing. And it included quite a wide range of things, from all the way from our TB clinic and somewhat other clinic, and all the way through the work of the veterinarian, I guess, and probably the whatever agronomists we had, and the farm co-op operation, and the whole thing. And I could never put on tape what the real nature of the project was, but I had never bothered to keep such a copy. Sharshmit sent me a copy. I hope I kept it. If anybody ever wants to know, maybe they can look at that. But it would be pretty hard to get an idea of what we were supposed to be doing. I don't think I'll even touch on that in the tape. Just do things that had to do more with kind of fun things that happened, I guess. Even anything that was more fun than any other thing. So what I'll do is, if something comes to my mind as we move on through the tape, maybe I'll just try to mention whatever comes to mind at any moment. In those years, talk to somebody in Korea who was in the Army, they would tell you they would tell you to a man that the Koreans were a bunch of thieves, that they would steal anything that you had. Of course, this is the perception of the people in the military, surrounded by those whatever thieves there are and prostitutes and such. And this is, of course, all that they see, and they have no idea what's really going on outside that little perimeter at all. But it's interesting to note that there was a thriving black market in those years, which the military would sell stuff to the Koreans, just the Army guys to make money. Koreans would steal stuff, those who were thieves. All kinds of stuff were going on, which made the economy thrive for everybody. And if you wanted something, you could go to these vast black markets, especially in a big city like Seoul, where there was simply a big black market area, and some of the smaller cities as well. And if we needed something, why, we'd take our Jeep and trailer and drive in there. And our Jeep was gray, not Army color. That was the UN color. And I don't remember anybody ever stealing anything from us. In fact, I remember those occasions when I left my billfold or a camera or something on a black market stand, and people had come running after me with it. And it was, I suppose, because we at least attempted to speak Korean and dealt with people in a reasonable, rational way. These were really just businessmen and women. And they were just honest, friendly people. These were busy, thriving place. I'm sure in my slides somewhere, I certainly hope so, I've got perhaps pictures looking down on one. But one of the neat things about them was that there were a lot of beer can roofs. And in those years, beer cans were solid beer cans. They were made out of good steel, and you could flex your muscles or train your muscles in your hands by crushing beer cans. And it really made a difference because it took a lot of pressure to do it, but they were made out of just excellent steel. And the outsides were painted these bright colors for all the various beer labels. And so what the Koreans would do was they would cut the ends out of the cans, slit the cans open lengthwise, and then overlap the little edges of the cans until they had a sheet of beer can metal that was about probably 1.5 foot by 4 feet, I would guess. And then they'd run it through a corrugator, and it made the most wonderful roofs that would last forever. They were so bright, colorful with all the different beer can colors, and absolutely indestructible. And you look down on the black market or a lot of other places, and you see these wonderful roofs. One of the things that would happen is occasionally Jim and I, one of us would have an occasion we'd have to leave Sakyo and run 40 or so miles up to Seoul, capital. And we'd have business up there, up at the UN or something. And I guess the place we tend to stay was maybe up at the embassy, U.S. Embassy compound, or in the UN place, maybe more UN. It's a little hard to distinguish now which was which. But, yeah, we'd go up there from time to time. And I can remember going up into the embassy dining room, the U.S. Embassy dining room. And that was always kind of a treat for us, you know, to get away from whatever we had down in the boonies. And so I remember going in there, for example, let's say for breakfast or some meal. And Jim and I were bearded and wearing plaid shirts and boots, which nobody else was. People would occasionally be sitting at another table in the dining room. They'd look over at us for a while. And they'd get up from their table and they'd walk over and they'd say, "Oh, I saw a movie of you guys at the UN building in New York. Oh, there's a big picture of you in the display area in the front of the UN building in New York." And of course, at least I don't think Jim and I ever saw those, but it was like they discovered a movie star or something, and it would come over to our table. And it was also like, well, we have this big organization called the UN, and God knows somebody ought to be out in the boonies doing something real, but we've never seen anybody actually doing it before. So it was always kind of a surprise and to have that happen, but it happened, you know, certainly many more times than once. Well, it may be that in the background you'll hear some heavy hammering. Mark, Kurt, and Brian are tearing out a wall here for my bathroom, between the bathroom and the bedroom. Last time we heard construction work in the background, and I guess the previous tape, it was Roland making a ramp for my wheelchair. Maybe you'll hear it, maybe you won't today. But I kind of playing back some of the stuff, and apparently one rather interesting or kind of important chapter I seem to have left out was the thing called the Lake House. And I graduated from college, and Norm, I think, still had maybe a year to go or something like that, but I certainly wasn't going to be working at Wesley Hub Club anymore. Actually, I had taken my senior year off anyway because I'd made enough money as a merchant seaman to get through the year, but now it was summer and I was graduated, and I either had already got a job at the radio station or was about to get one, and we had a place to live, and so we started looking around. Houseboats had always been good prior to that. There used to be a cheap way to live. We didn't come up with one of those for some reason. I don't know why. And we're looking in the paper, you know, and we were in a hurry anyway. But tried one place, an apartment, and another apartment. So they were overpriced and no good. And so one night we took another look in the newspaper, and here was a house for rent. So it was way out on Sandpoint Way in 100th, and so we drove out there. Turned out to be a little real estate office. Went in, the guy said, "Well, you want to go look at the house?" We said, "Sure." So we got in his car, and he drove us a couple blocks, and we went, it was dark, we went down these steep steps and into the house, and we looked it over with him. It was furnished somewhat, not a lot, but good-sized house. $100 a month. Whoa, you know, that sounds pretty good. So I remember actually saying to the guy, "Well, wrap it up." And so we signed some papers and gave him some money, and we went and sat down in the living room. There's a fireplace in there, easy chair and a couch and stuff, and talked for a while. I'm looking out the window, and like the moon or something was shining on some water out there. "What's that?" I said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Well, it looks like there's some water out there." I said, "What's that?" He said, "Oh, that's Lake Washington." I said, "What?" He said, that's Lake Washington." And we get up out of our chairs and walk over to the door and look out and says, "Is that our dock?" He says, "Yeah." Is that our float out beyond the dock? Yeah. We were, of course, swept away. And anyway, he left, and that night we tossed our sleeping bags out on the front lawn. Slept out on the front lawn that night. And I guess we must have gone swimming at least in the morning when we got up. I know we went swimming sometime, probably at night and the morning both. So here we had this place, and hadn't been there very long. I don't think maybe than 40 days, more than a few days. And, some guys that we knew, Bob Joyce and who the heck all, I don't remember, Graham Hutchins maybe. Hey, you got room for more people to live out here? Norm and I each had a room. Oh, Dick Schaefer came out early on. And pretty soon they'd established a small dormitory up in the attic. And I forget there were other rooms around or something, but it didn't really impinge on us a whole lot. But the cost of living shot down to nearly zero by the time everybody's. I think we had maybe as many as 12 guys living there at once. And what's odd is that it never seemed crowded. As far as I remember, you could always sit down and read a book at night without any problem, which I love to do because now I no longer had to study every night. It was just a wonderful experience. I joined the Book of the Month Club, actually. Read some fun books. This was just really a great treat for me. And lived in the lake house for myself, anyway, for, I guess, a year and a half. And not only did people move in, but people had little sailboats. One particular kind with those years was called a flatty. And they were a very fast and broad little boat, and you could go like crazy skimming across the lake and take 3 people with you. Felt like it. They leave these boats there and say, "Can we leave your boat, my boat at your dock here?" And just so I can use it when I come out. But of course, they almost never came out. Yeah, we ended up with 3 sailboats and this wonderful old rowboat that we had. We called Old Soak, and it was very nice, to say the least. Interesting that the lake house had an awful lot to do with my job at the radio station, because I'd gone to the littlest radio station in town, and they didn't pay me very much. The most I ever made was $400 in 1 month, and a lot of times a lot less than that, because I was in those years pretty much living on the advertising I was selling for the station. I'd go out and sell the advertising and write the copy and do whatever broadcasts I had to do. And I had gone through with a small number of other guys, might have been a couple of girls in there, that also, we really all wanted to get into radio news. And I was the only one that ever did, because in every case the others went out to the big radio stations, King, Cairo, and so on, Como. And they got jobs all right, but what they did was they got jobs in clerical positions, typing up the log and stuff like that. And from time to time, I'd run into them after I had a newscast, and they'd say, "Oh, that's what I always wanted to do, but I never got to." But the lake house was related to it in that they got paid more than I did, but really not all that much. But I didn't have any cost of living, and so my life for that year and a half, or a little over a year that I worked at the radio station itself, was really quite flexible and easy, and I had opportunities to do pretty much anything I wanted to at the radio station, and could pretty much go and come as I wanted to. And I couldn't have afforded it, except that my life was so cheap and at the same time so luxurious that it was awfully hard to walk away from. Yesterday, Dell and Sally were here, and one asked me to tell an instance from Korea. Jim and I had moved on to Sopkio at that time, and we moved over there in the winter, I guess in December. And it was pretty cold and pretty snowy. And we moved into this, it was a hotel. I mean, I don't know, you'd see it as a hotel if you moved in into Renton or something, but it was a hotel. And it had front windows with little panes in it for part of it. And I remember when we moved in, every little kid in town looking in the windows at these Americans. Something strange that they had never seen before. It must have been a great wonder to them. But, yeah, we moved in there to Sopkio, into the hotel. Oh, I know what it was, yeah. And the city elders or city fathers or whatever had certain things they recommended for us to do, and we were there to pretty much work with them. And thought, hey, let's listen to these guys. And two things I remember in particular that they recommended. One is that they recommended some woman as a cook, and I know she couldn't read because she could only cook certain things and never learned to really cook much of anything else. But the other thing was there was this kid, must have been a 13-year-old kid or something like that. It was a newspaper boy in town, and he was a busy son of a gun. You'd see him rushing around to make sure the newspapers were delivered, and any other thing he could scare up that needed to be done. And his father had been killed he was a interpreter of the American troops, and they'd gotten in a crossfire somewhere, he'd gotten killed, and so. Well, anyway, that of course was Gilron, and yeah. So fine, we thought we should hire him, and we said, okay, you think so? That's what we'll do. And it wasn't too long before we found out why, because he's one of these people that very soon becomes indispensable. And you're sending him on errands up to Seoul and down to Daegu and God knows where. And an incredible phenomenon he was. But the thing that she had asked me to tell about was the cook, yeah. And so every morning for breakfast we would, cold winter morning, we would have what do you call bean sprout soup, which was healthy and warm and good. Bean sprout soup and rice and seaweed. And so we went morning after morning like this, and probably lunch after lunch too, for that matter. I don't remember a lot of the other meals, but one morning we had a box of Bisquick, and somewhere we'd gotten some syrup too. So I suspect we'd made our first trip up to the black market at was it Chonan or someplace? That wasn't quite right. One of the nearby larger towns, maybe 10 miles down the road or something like that. But anyway, somehow we had some syrup and we had some Bisquick. So everywhere in the world there seemed to be these Chinese restaurants, and I don't know, a couple doors down from the hotel, I think it might have been, or it might have been the very next door, I don't know. There was, these buildings touched up against each other. There was a small building there, and it had dirt floors and wooden benches and rude wooden tables, and it was cold inside. But the Chinese cook in there, it is cooking on cast iron woks. And the cast iron woks, of course, set down into holes in the fire, the roaring wood fire underneath them, and these woks got very, very hot indeed. So we go in there with our box of Bisquick and hand it to the guy and just give him a little bit of a demonstration. He's a Chinese speaker, and didn't take any explanation for him to understand what we wanted. And he takes and he mixes up this flour and water or whatever he mixed it with and whips it up with his bamboo whip and at a very fast pace. And then he pours it all over the inside of this great big cast iron wok sitting in a roaring fire. And it goes down in the fire, very thin, like instead of a pancake, I suppose you think more of a, what do you call those, kind of a French thing, a very thin pancake. Anyway, it had barely gotten in there, it's done on one side already, and he whops it up concave, whips it around in the air, convex side down, and zaps it into the pan again, like that. And he lifts this thing out of there, cuts it into a couple of pieces, and we got pancakes, and they were good. I suppose he made 2 or 3 of those, but that was a funny thing. We had pancakes that morning. I don't know why she asked me to tell that. Kind of funny, though. It was a good morning. It was always good to have kind of a change of pace, I suppose. And one of the things I remember, sometimes we go up to Seoul. There was a big old Capitol building there with a standard kind of a Capitol dome and everything. And in the war, why it had been fought over for 3 years, and it was heavily pockmarked with cannon fire and machine gun fire and aircraft fire, and obviously they'd shot a number of bombs in the inside of it. But it seemed that this big old place was indestructible, and I remember it had a balcony up on one level at least, and you'd go up what was left, the marble stairs, the old pockmarked marble stairs. You come up on this balcony, and it was just charred black in places, just a great big old black area in there. And somehow somebody early on had built a restaurant in there, and walled it off a bit, I guess. And you go up to Seoul, and one of the great, wonderful things, of course, I like coffee and breakfast and all that. Go into this, it was kind of like an American restaurant that a lot of Koreans went to as well. Kind of an international place, and every once in a while I remember the pleasure of going up to that wonderful restaurant up in the Capitol building and getting American breakfast. I suppose probably lunches too. I don't know whether I remember breakfast in particular. And I've also mentioned that a bridge in Korea in those years was a rare thing. The bridges get knocked out first, and so it takes a long time to rebuild them all, and we always driving through rivers and stuff. It's fairly common. I remember kind of drifting sideways down a river in a Jeep sometime. There may be water over our feet or not. And almost kind of got across, but some rivers are too big for that. And if you'd come to such a river as that, why, somebody would have put together a big old raft, or they'd have a boat of some kind, and run the Jeep out onto it and cross the river, or the truck, whatever we were using. And I was interested in the Korean boats. And I know there was one across the Han River in one place out east of Yongin, where we were that first year. I remember going out there, and it's kind of I think a scow-like boat, probably a little wider than a Jeep, maybe a couple of feet to spare on each side even, or at least a foot. And the thing must have been, I suppose, 30 feet long. You get the Jeep and a bunch of people and stuff on there. And, it had a big sweep oar in the back, just one single sweep oar. A guy would paddle you across the river. So we got the Jeep on there, and I asked him if I could paddle it across. And so I grabbed the big old sweep oar, and the guy let me run it across the river. And it was odd, but they were also surprised to find that somebody that wasn't a riverman right there knew how to scull a boat. But that was a kind of a typical thing of me to do. If I found some kind of a boat or other that they would let me run it. I remember going out with my friend Mr. Cho out to the seashore and sailing some junks out there. And that was always a nice thing to do. The Korea period, something comes to my mind, but I put in a couple of years there and I was going to come back to the U.S. and it was November. And I thought, well, I got an air ticket back to the United States, but I think I'll just cash that in and take the money and go down on the waterfront and see if I can get a job on a freighter down there. So I went over to the port of Incheon and went up to some kind of a British steamship company, I guess. And things were, in those years, were, as you can imagine, seemed kind of plain and bare board sorts of operations. Went up some steep stairs, this place, and talked to the guy, Brit, and he says, no, he says, we never have a need for a merchant seaman. It just doesn't happen. I said, okay, thanks. Walked down the stairs, got to the bottom, and the guy's calling me back again. He says, come on back up. He says, my gosh, I wouldn't have believed it, but we got a ship here that needs a crew member. So I went back up, and I said, where's it going? He says, Australia. I said, well, that's all good enough, but what happens when I get to Australia? Can I go on, or will they hire an Aussie to go from there? He says, well, when you get to Australia, he says, you'll just be down under. Those were his words. So then you'll just be down under. I thought, I don't know if I can get out of Australia. And I didn't do it. And so then I went to, I guess it was some American company of some kind that probably handled tramp steamers or whatever. And I went in there. Pretty much the same thing. The guy said, no, that never happens. Again, I walked away, and at some point he stopped me and said, wait. He says, my God, I don't believe it, but he says there's a ship in here that somebody jumped ship when they left the U.S., and the maritime rules require that if they can find a person with an appropriate seaman's card, that they have to hire him. And they need one person, and they really did need a person. It wasn't just a matter of having to. Besides that, they were short crew. So, okay, I'm going to go to work on this boat, and it's a rusty old scow, if you ever heard of one, including the big chunks of rust coming off the decks. It had Greek officers, whom it was hard to understand. Had an American crew out of Baltimore, and I think had probably Chinese steward department or something. And I never was in touch with the engineering people on that boat. But anyway, this was an old reciprocating engine, steam engine, they call Liberty ship. So okay, I'm going in there and get all arrangements made with the captain and everything. And I just an ordinary seaman, but they said, well, sorry, but you're going to have to take the able seaman's place, because we got an able seaman here somehow can't seem to steer a compass course. So my real job became pretty much two things. One is I'd be the quartermaster, and steer the boat for a couple hours every night, maybe more. It seemed like a couple hours. And I was on the same watch as the captain, who was a very interesting chap, and had started out as a Greek sailor on sailboats. But anyway, so we worked together, Captain Notius and I. And what was I going to say about that? Oh, then there was another thing where the quartermaster's supposed to take an hour off and just be on what they called standby at night. So I'd go down to the mess and have coffee and so on. I thought it was a pretty good job. So I got to work as an AB and got to be the one who who steered the boat. And what was interesting to me was, well, it had the big old-fashioned wooden steering wheel with those kind of spokes that stick out on the end and stand on this wooden grid, and it had a magnetic compass. And that's how I steered the boat, was off the magnetic compass. The captain put a course on the blackboard, and he'd pretty much go away and leave me with the ship. I steered the ship back to the U.S., but it took us a long time because there wasn't any cargo leaving Korea, and they'd hauled a load of coal in there, and somehow they'd gotten the ballast valves plugged and couldn't even take on water ballast. So here we're bringing this empty ship back with no water ballast or any other ballast, and the propeller sticking part out of water, so that if you go up over a big wave, it would dig down in the back. And when you come gliding down the wave, why, the propeller would come nearly all the way out of water, just shake the whole ship. Bubble, 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 and it would take a hold again. That's the way we went across the ocean. I'll be danged, it took us a month to get from Incheon to Coos Bay, Oregon. The night I went aboard this ship, the crew members had all gone ashore and got drunk and all the other stuff that they do. And the bosun, the night that I went to get on the ship, a dark night with a wind blowing, it was cold, and they'd come in with a launch, just a lifeboat-looking launch. And so we get in this thing, but before we get in it, we had to pick up the bosun. This guy was probably a pretty big guy, it's, over 6 feet anyway. And we carried him lengthwise under our arms, like we're marching along with this, like a piece of wood under our right arms. The guy just passed out cold. We just carried him on up, laid him on in this launch, and carried him out to the ship, and then the guy stuck him in a bed somewhere. And the next morning he had to run those battered old steam winches to get the anchor up, and he was in bad shape. But the other guys wouldn't do his job for him. They said, "Nope, you're the bosun, you do it." Oh, God, I've never seen a guy that drunk in my life. It was like carrying a piece of wood. It was Thanksgiving night, 1955. And as I've thought about it since, and given it quite a bit of thought here last day or so, I realized that that was pretty much it. That was the last interesting thing that ever happened in my life, and really from then on, it was pretty much just the eventual drudgery of having to work for a living and trying to raise a family and all that sort of thing. And I pretty much, I think that pretty much wrapped it up. I guess I must have been maybe 26 by then, and so about all I can say is thanks for listening, and that's it. Oh, one more thing. Yeah, there was the time, gosh, I was teaching by then. And Roland and Brian were both born by then, and living and sleeping in bunk beds, and I had a long day at school one day. And then I had some kind of a meeting I had to go to. God dang. Went into the night, and I got home like around 2 o'clock in the morning. And I was actually wearing a suit and a tie and shirt and everything like that. And I came in to see how the kids were doing. I heard Roland up in the top bunk. I think it was Roland. And he was not feeling good. He was sick. And so I peeled the covers back off of him and discovered that he had thrown up. And I dumped it all down inside the bunk beds, inside the frame, under the bed, against the wall, over my clothes, and just over everything. And Luana had already had enough of a day as it was, and I had to clean the whole thing up myself. That was I guess the only other really exciting thing that happened. just went back and listened to the business about leaving Incheon. It wasn't Thanksgiving night, actually, it was Thanksgiving Eve. Now that makes a difference. It was a fairly cold, blowing Korean night, dark. One thing about it was dark when it was dark there, because there weren't lights everywhere, and or anywhere maybe. No moon or stars in that night, but there's enough light around. Maybe I could see something anyway. I had one memory that I guess is kind of poignant, really, that happened on that. I'd gone down there to, it must have been the night before, actually, to find out where the ship was and all that, and make arrangements to get on board. And afterwards, I was going to have to go back to Seoul to, I don't know, spend the night and finish some things up. For some reason, I don't even know how I got down there to Incheon from Seoul. I don't remember at all. I certainly hadn't brought a Jeep down. But anyway, I made whatever arrangements I was going to make, I guess, out on the ship and come back ashore probably. But nobody around, except it was very, very dark and blustery and kind of miserable and wet and cold. And there was somebody, a young kid, I guess must have been a teenager, maybe a 13, 14-year-old kid who had built a little pile of bricks and stone that reached up about a foot